In episode 1, which is divided into 2 parts, we'll be writing and arranging a piece of music for strings, which is the first violins, second violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. Now, I initially intended to simply upload this raw footage of my spontaneous project. However, that would have resulted in a 4.5-hour video of me arranging, deleting, replaying, editing, copying, and pasting, leading to an extensive editing due to the many interruptions I had during the production when I forgot to actually turn off the screen recorder. Thankfully, I decided to streamline the experience by narrating the process with added graphics and animations. This approach offers a more personal glimpse into how I arrange for a string ensemble and explains the reasons behind my choices, which I believe will be much more beneficial for you. In part 1, we will only be arranging section A, and in part 2, we will tackle section B and the restatement of section A. Now, the entire composition is in ternary form or ABA form. There's section A, which is the statement. There's section B, the contrast, and then section A, which is basically a restatement of the section A that the piece of music started on. Only this time, the ending will be modified, resulting in a perfect, authentic cadence. Without wasting any more time, here is the basic rundown of the structure of section A. The melody of section A consists of an ABAC form. A theme, which is bar 1 and 2, which I call the question, with the implied harmony tonic to dominant. The B theme, which is bar 3 and 4, which I call the answer to the question, with the implied harmony subdominant to dominant, with an imperfect or half cadence. The exact repeat of A theme, the question, will be in bar 5 and 6, with the implied harmony once again tonic to dominant. Then we get the C theme, which is bar 7 and 8, the final answer. The implied harmony subdominant to a dominant 7th, and then to a tonic. Now let's listen to the melody accompanied by an animated version of the graphics. This will provide you with a clearer understanding of the structure of section A. Okay, when I set out to compose for strings or any group of instruments, I always work according to the SATB model of vocal ranges, which is your soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And I first arrange the score in 4-part harmony. In the soprano higher range, we have the first violins. In the soprano lower range, we have the second violins. In the alto range, we have the violas. In the tenor range, we have the cellos occupying the higher bass clef range. And in the bass range, we have the double basses occupying the lower bass clef range. Keep in mind that there is a natural overlap between the various ranges as illustrated in this diagram. This pitch and frequency range diagram emphasizes that when composing or arranging for any musical instrument, you cannot notate music higher or lower than the range for which the instrument was designed. When arranging for strings, we essentially have 6 parts or instruments, which need to then be arranged in 4-part harmony. There is a method I developed for my arranging students that helps them keep track of which chord notes they have used, preventing confusion, especially when they are still learning the principles of harmony. So what I do is I build the chords using letter names, starting with the root at the bottom, then the 3rd, the 5th, and finally doubling the root by placing it at the top. However, this doesn't mean that the doubled root will always be at the top. It's just a tool. Once you've added a chord note to your score, you can then cross it off, allowing you to see which other chord note options are still available. I do not always double the root. Sometimes it might be the 3rd, the 5th, or even the 7th of the chord that gets doubled. So a very important question to ask is, do all the chord members need to be present? And the answer is no. However, I try my best to allocate the chord members in a way that flows with the voice leading. I also ensure that the chords sound balanced both on their own and in relation to the other chords around it. I will, however, stress that if the chord is a 7th chord, such as a dominant 7th, it's essential that the 7th of the chord is present for it to be harmonically correct. Once I've completed my chord chart tool, it may look something like this. This illustrates that these 3 chords, I have omitted the 5th member of the chord for various reasons. Now, arranging for 4-part harmony results in the triad becoming a chord. Remember, a triad consists of 3 notes. the root, the third, and the fifth. So when do we call a triad a chord? We refer to it as a chord when it has 4 or more notes. Chords comprise the 3 notes of the triad, the root, the third, and the fifth, along with 1 or more additional notes, which may include a doubled root. For 7th chords such as a dominant 7th or a major 7th, the 7th note will also be included. Now, regardless of whether a chord has 3 or 4 notes, we often use the term chord interchangeably. However, we can never refer to a chord with 4 or more notes as a triad, since the word triad specifically refers to 3 notes. So for the sake of avoiding any confusion, I will use the term chord throughout this tutorial. My workflow is simple, but it's not set in stone. I start with the first and the second violins, then I move down to the double basses, then I move upwards to the cellos and the violas, which I usually work on simultaneously to construct the chords and the voice leading. There are 2 aspects to harmonic movement. There's vertical movement, which refers to the simultaneous combination of notes that create chords, highlighting how harmonies are built or layered from the bottom up and vice versa. In contrast, horizontal movement pertains to the flow and development of musical lines, as well as the progression of chords over time from left to right. It underscores how the individual notes of chords interact with those of neighboring chords, resulting in smooth voice leading. These vertical and horizontal aspects highlight that chords require chords to fulfill their purpose. A single chord lacks horizontal movement, which means it exists solely for its own sake. However, when 2 or more chords are placed next to one another, voice leading occurs as the chord members continue to move with a specific goal in mind. So the basic rule when dealing with the inner voices like the cellos and the violas regarding voice leading is to avoid large leaps at all costs. The preferred movement is stepwise motion, up or down of intervals of a second, and small leaps up or down of intervals of a third. If there are instances where leaps of an interval of a fourth or more are unavoidable, then there must be a very good reason for such voice leading that will contribute to the overall harmonic balance of the arrangement and not detract from it. You will notice that I pay particular attention to the inner voices of the viola and the cello because they offer harmonic stability and create opportunities for counter melodies that enrich the overall composition. So let's get started with our string arrangement eventually. So I start by creating the main melody, which is in the first violin part. You will see that I have also added the chord symbols at the top of the first violin part to give me a guideline to the implied harmony. I don't always do this. Actually, for the sake of this video, that's why I did it. I then copy and paste the first violin part over to the second violin stave and move it 1 octave lower. Let's see what this sounds like. Basically, the effect of 2 of the same musical instruments playing an octave apart achieves the expected result. However, I would say that having the second violin part 1 octave lower helps to soften the higher strings, preventing them from sounding too screechy. Always keep in mind that nothing is set in stone, and as I get to arranging for the other lower strings, I might change sections of the second violin here and there. Now I start laying out the double bass part, which is really the harmonic foundation to the whole string section and obviously this arrangement. I opt for using the root of the chord since it's a good way to ground the harmony. Notice that I'm not too worried about using other chord notes or making the bass part interesting at this stage. I will do this when I start building the harmonies in the other parts. So now that I've completed the bass part for section 1, let's have a listen to it along with the first and the second violin part. So I think here that the double bass part will sound better if it's played pizzicato. Who knows, I might change the articulation later on for certain sections. And adding the dynamics so that the bass part is not drowned out by the first and second violin part. For some, this demonstration might feel tedious and boring, as you'll hear the same music from various sections played over and over in different forms. The composition process isn't always spectacular. It often involves a lot of careful listening to different parts, both individually and in combination with the others to achieve the right harmony, progression, sound, and root movements among the parts. Now let's have a listen again. I now begin laying out the cello part, which strengthens the harmonic foundation of the double basses. So here I choose which chord note is best that will support the double bass part as well as harmonize with the other strings using my chord harmony tool we created earlier. I decided to double the root of the double bass part an octave higher in the cello part. Let's have a listen to the basses, cellos and violins together now. I'm going to add some dynamics to the cello part as well. You see, I can go ahead and just place chord notes randomly, but I've decided to do what every good theory music student would do. I look at what chord notes are missing, which also means I'm going to have to look at the viola part too, in terms of building the vertical and the horizontal aspect of the harmony. After hearing everything together, I can hear that the double bass is too low and seems very dark. So here is where I make the decision to move the bass part up an octave to try and lift the overall mood. You've got to remember that the double bass actually sounds an octave lower than what it is written. So it is low as it is. The basic rule when dealing with the inner voices like the cellos and the violas regarding voice leading is to avoid large leaps at all costs. The preferred movement is stepwise motion up or down of intervals of a second and small leaps up or down of intervals of a third. If there are instances where leaps of an interval of a fourth or more are unavoidable, then there must be a very good reason for such voice leading that will contribute to the overall harmonic balance of the arrangement and not detract from it. The long note values in bar 1 and 2 create the overall impression to me that the arrangement is moving in slow motion. Therefore, I believe that there is a need for more movement on the second beat of each bar in the lower strings to act as a bridge to the next theme as well as balance out the rhythm. In bar 3, one needs to balance out the crotchet notes in the first and the second violins with maybe some quavers in the viola part. This also involves addressing the interval leap of a fifth from the middle C, the tonic, to the G, which is the dominant, which, as I mentioned, should be avoided in the inner voices as much as possible. And in bar 4, one can maybe balance out the quavers in the violins with crotchets or minims in the lower strings. Okay, let's get back to bar 1 and see where we can make some of the changes I have suggested. I think I will focus on the cello in the tenor voice with a short counter melody. The reason for this is to create some contrast with the violin in the soprano voice. And I want to avoid making the rhythm move too quickly. So I will use crotchets to maintain the flow of the minims in the violins and at the same time iron out the slow motion impression. Here we have the unaccented neighboring tone, which is a non-harmonic tone or non-chord note. Because these unaccented non-chord notes occur on the weak beats, they typically go almost unnoticed, helping to smooth out the melodic line. Okay, I think because the cellos had their chance to shine in bar 1, in bar 2 I'm going to balance it out with the viola in the alto voice. Using the crotchet does not solve my issue with filling in the space in sound created by the minims. So I'm going to get a little bit adventurous and I think I'm going to use a triplet. Here we have another unaccented neighboring tone with the supertonic approaching the tonic in a 2-1 progression from above. Now the effect I was looking for is not really present here. Not because the triplet does not work, but because the violas are not as prominent and maybe too soft. So I think I will add the triplet figure to the cellos as well to strengthen the violas and to strengthen the overall effect. So this time the triplet in the cellos will harmonize a third down from the violas. Let's have a listen. Sounds much better than when we only had the violas playing the triplet. The cellos also add a support from a timbre point of view. You know what the word timbre means? Is basically the tone color of an instrument. Now let's focus on bar 3. Here the melody in the violin moves downwards. So ideally from a theoretical perspective, we should allow for contrary motion in the violas or the cellos. Using quavers for the rhythmic content would be more effective against the crotchets in the violins. As we discussed earlier, we want to smooth out this large interval leap so that the viola, as an inner voice, transitions smoothly to the next section. Leaps in the soprano, which is the violins, and the double basses are more acceptable than in the tenor and the alto inner voices. Let's have a listen to that. In my opinion, the quavers work, but the rhythmic feel is too tame. It's too predictable. I always strive to incorporate an element of surprise throughout my compositions. For example, in bar 1, the cello begins with a counter melody, which is not typically the norm. Then in bar 2, the triplets add an element of surprise. Now let's explore how we can adapt this rhythmic figure to further enhance that element of surprise. So let's start by listening to the viola part on its own. I'm going to tie these middle C's together. This should provide an offbeat impression. Let's have a listen. Perfect. The contrary motion in the viola part works perfectly. This is a chord of a major 7th, and here are the notes, the F, the A, the C, and the E. Okay, in bar 4, the melody in the violins moves upwards in quavers, so ideally, from a theoretical perspective, we should allow for contrary motion in the violas or cellos using crotchets for the rhythmic content, which will be more effective against the quavers in the violins. I think let us continue with the viola part. Let's have a listen. Okay, that is great. Remember, we wanted to close the leap between the C and the G as smoothly as possible. When you arrive at the G in the viola part, obviously this is the doubled root of the dominant 7th chord, which is the tension chord. Now, by leaving the G as a semi-breathe, in my opinion, creates more tension than what I desire. And notice that there is once again a large leap from the G down to the C, which is what I want to avoid. You see that little yellow circle? There isn't a C there at the moment, but it will appear a little bit later. So if you listen to this clip in contrast to the previous one, you'll notice that we have closed this gap on either side by avoiding the unwanted leaps in the inner voices. The tension created by the long G is resolved smoothly by moving in contrary motion down to the tonic. What I always strive to do is to balance out the different parts of the arrangement, almost like a weighing scale or like a question and answer dynamic. I don't want to use the exact same material from the viola part in the cello part, specifically the quavers, because that would create an excess of quavers given that the violin part already has enough. However, I can utilize a modified version of the rhythmic material from the viola part in the cello part. So the tonic in bar 5 of the cello part won't work due to the significant downward leap, and I already have the root doubled in the viola part. To ensure a smoother melody line in the cello part, I will use the G, which is the 5th of the tonic chord instead. Let's have a listen to this. Same scenario as the viola part in bar 3. I'm going to tie the B's together. This should provide an offbeat impression. Let's listen. I will say that the effect is quite suitable. If you listen closely, you can hear the smooth counter melody in the cello part. By incorporating the passing note, 6 to 5 melodic progression connects and transitions seamlessly into the restatement of the counter melody from bar 1 in the cello part. So I want to reiterate the balance of motion among the inner voices in bar 4. The violins move in an upward stepwise motion, while the violas counteracts this with downward contrary motion. The cellos provide a balance by tying a dotted minim B which harmonizes with the viola and then introduces the passing quaver note A, moving in contrary motion to the violins and in similar motion to the viola part. I hope you got that. I've decided to incorporate more contrary motion now in the double bass part, using quavers that move downwards in a 5-4-3-2-1 progression. This not only complements the quavers in the violin part, but also provides a balance between the lower strings and the higher strings, as well as balancing the crotchets in the viola part. It's all about balance. So let's change the articulation here to arco, which I forgot to do earlier on, which is bowing instead of pizzicato. So I'm just going to copy and paste the A theme material over to the restatement of the A theme. Let me do that. Okay, let's see what we can do with bar 7, which is the C theme and ending of the section A. The material is more of a modification of the B theme. There's something bothering me here. Let's see if I can hear what it is. I think that works, and it doubles the soprano as well as provides contrary motion, but for a moment, to the already overuse of downward motion in the lower strings of bar 4. Oops, I've noticed a potentially missing chord member, the third of the tonic chord, E. Including it will provide a smoother progression to the fifth of the tonic, eliminating the large leap from the tonic to the dominant. As I mentioned earlier, leaps are more acceptable in the soprano and the bass parts. However, this addition also reinforces the tonic as the home bass or tonal center as we transition to the dominant in bar 2 by outlining the tonic chord in the bass part. This move also turns the root position tonic chord into a first inversion C chord, first inversion tonic chord. I forgot to input the pizzicato here. Let me sort that out. Okay, another advantage of changing the tonic root from C to E on the second beat is that it allows the bass to move in contrary motion to the soprano part, which is precisely what we want if the voice leading permits it. Okay, if you are a harmony student, then it would be good to use all Roman numerals or figured bass. So let me add that for you. Okay, so here we have a hint of a sequence. A sequence is a repetition in the same voice of a melodic fragment at a different pitch level, usually descending or ascending stepwise. So in bar 1, the melody is E to C on the first and second beat, and in bar 2, the same melody is repeated a step lower, a whole tone, on the second beat, which is the off beat, approached by a passing note C. The same two notes, D and B, are found in the viola part. This time the rhythm is slower, which really complements that. So basically you've got the same melody in bar 1 and bar 2, which is actually taking place in two voices at the same time, but just a different rhythmic dynamic. Okay, let's sort out the double bass line and the voice leading for the perfect authentic cadence, making sure that the viola and the cello move in contrary motion as they approach the home bass or the tonal center. Ending on the tonic is a good idea, but the leap down is not suitable for the cello. Additionally, the tonic in this chord appears 3 times and there is no 5th member present. Since this is the final home bass chord, I would like to feature all 3 members of the chord, the root, the 3rd and the 5th, while also doubling the root to ensure a stronger tonic quality. The 1st and 2nd violins already have the tonic an octave apart, so the root of the tonic in the double bass effectively addresses the root doubling requirement. Okay, the ending as it works to some extent. Over here, I've included a G sus chord, which in conventional harmony language is what we call a 4/3 suspension. Although I would not say that this is a full suspension, but rather a hint of a suspension because it has no preparation phase, which is a repeat tone before the suspension, but is dissonant in nature, which is what we want. Suspensions only occur as accented non-harmonic tones, and while this one occurs on the beat, the 2nd beat, we have the 4th degree of the dominant chord resolving downwards to the 3rd degree, which gives it its name, the 4/3 suspension. But I was not satisfied, so I moved the dominant 7th into a retardation, which is similar to a suspension, only it resolves upwards in the soprano voice. I sincerely hope that I've not confused you. The reason for using a suspension and then a retardation is to create a sense of anticipation for the ending, rather than just ending for the sake of ending. Creating a dissonant factor for the suspension, which is a double G, a D, a F, and a C, in order to do that, I will have to move the 2nd violin parts around. So I think this last beat I want to move the B upwards to the D, which means resolution is downwards from the D, the supertonic, to the C tonic in a 2-1 progression. And in the 1st violin part, you'll see the voice leading is going to be upwards from the B, which is the leading note, to the C, the tonic. Instead of saying a 7-1 progression, it's going to be a 7-8 progression because you are moving from a 7 up to the upper tonic, which is the 8th note of the scale. I hope that makes sense. Now I believe the violins on the retardation needs to be balanced with the cellos through a 4/5 melodic voice leading. So with the addition of the cello part, it sounds fuller and more rounded. So the harmony in the last 2 bars gives us a perfect authentic cadence. Bar 7 subdominant to this dominant 7th, and bar 8 the tonic. Since this is the end of section A, the double bass needs to lead us into section B of our ternary form. Well, this is the end of our demonstration or tutorial. I hope you enjoyed watching, and I want to say thank you so much for watching. If this is the type of content that you would like to see more of, then please give me a message in the comments, give me a subject you would like, or just say you would like more of this type of thing. I will also be uploading part 2 in the near future, and then we can finish the whole composition. You can see how I then also ended and round the whole composition off. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can get all the notifications of up and coming videos and tutorials that I'm going to be launching. I am going to be doing a harmony series where I'm going to be dealing with all the principles of harmony from the beginning to much more advanced principles. So look forward to that. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, wonderful day wherever you find yourself in the world. Have a wonderful musical day.